Welcome to Unlocked. I am Dr. Joel Swakowski. In this show, we explore how truth comes to life through real stories and real people. Today, I'm joined by John Lenhart once again. We are continuing the mobbing series where we get to see an incredible epic story of what John dealt with in the writing, publishing, and simply discussing of and teaching of the information within his book, Modeling God, the Meaning of Life. I'm excited for you to hear part 3. Let's dig in. All right. Hey, John, welcome back. Thanks for being here again. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Joel. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. So this is Mobbed, the story of you being mobbed, part 3. So before we get into this part of this epic story, could you give us a recap?
Yes. So I think this is really going to come into play, everything we've been talking about before. So, and remember, the thing is that I got everything for this episode from a diary, but I'm not sharing everything that happened at this time. I'm just sharing what's pertinent to this part of the story. So the recap is this. In 2001, a woman claiming to be a prophetess leaves the big church and says it needs to split 7 ways so the Spirit can flow in the valley. The pastor of a charismatic church takes her in and attempts to split the big church by attacking the son of the big church pastor for having an inappropriate relationship. The man whom the son replaced as the youth pastor in the big church became the pastor of a small church, San Damiano. So in Mobbed Part 1, we covered my time at that church, San Damiano, and how the pastor's mentor, whom we call the other John, bullied me by calling me a cult leader, not meeting with me, and not allowing me to be heard. The mentee, my mentee, confronted the pastor to resolve the conflict, and when he wouldn't, I chose to leave so that I wasn't a distraction. Now, in Mobbed Part 2, we covered the year 2007. That's when Modeling God was published.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, I'd sold about 200 books and had gotten fired from my job. And as 2008 began, I was trying to find a job somewhere in the United States, and I was looking forward to being off the hook with God. I was feeling the existential burden of being the only person with a non-contradictory model for God, and I felt I did my best to get that out.
Yeah.
I failed, but I did my best. And so now I could go back to my corporate life. And as there were no jobs in Northeast Wisconsin that met my salary requirements, I was looking forward to leaving the valley behind and all these wonderful people I met, and leaving the fact that I wrote this book, Modeling God, behind as some sort of trivia question about my life, and take a job somewhere else in the United States.
Yeah. That's quite the first 2 episodes, and what? That last one only covered like 1 year of time, not even.
Right, right. Well, it's going to start getting really dicey and strategic. So for those who want to really put themselves in my shoes, I'm going to present today's portion. It's just the first 5 months of 2008. I want to just present this portion, and let you decide how you would have handled this, because there is a lot of things going on in this.
That's great.
So just to recap, we were meeting once a week. I was meeting once a week with all these guys in like a man club, man group at Perkins.
Yeah.
And then every 2 weeks, we were meeting with these teens at the Hub, this place in Neenah, Wisconsin. So we were still doing that. We were still doing that type of stuff. But what happened was the charismatic church pastor started increasing his attacks against the big church pastor's son. And the mentee was serving as the number 2 to the big church pastor's son in their youth ministry or young adult ministry called Crossing.
Yeah. I remember going to a couple of those when the mentee was even doing some of the teachings on the information from Modeling God.
Right. He taught some of this Modeling God, but he was also kind of taken over because the pastor's son was dealing with all these accusations, and so the mentee was really taken over, and the pastor's son was kind of ducking the mentee's questions. The mentee was trying to understand, and again, the mentee is your oldest brother, so he's trying to understand what's going on, and is he going to end up taking over Crossing? Because he started really believing he was going to take over Crossing because the pastor's son was just nowhere nowhere involved in all of this.
And his
So,
relationship with the pastor of the big church at the time was as good as it ever had been.
right.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is the mentee was getting along with the pastor of the big
Yeah.
church. So in February, the charismatic pastor just ramped up his attacks to the point that he was calling for a criminal investigation, and everything he wrote and published was very well written. Clearly, it had been looked over by a lawyer. It was very carefully written, and it was put out there. And he was actually calling for this criminal investigation, and things were just really ramping up. And by the end of the month, we heard that the girl's parents weren't happy with the charismatic pastor. And on the last day of the month, the girl drops all charges.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so all this momentum he had feeling like that, because this all again goes to like, oh, is this the catalyst that's going to make this prophecy come true? Or maybe, we don't know what his intentions were, but it seems like, hey, let's get this church to split, right? This might be the way it happens.
Well, that's a great point because I can theorize what his intentions are, but I want to give everybody the same information and see where everybody else comes out. So that's the thing, is that it looked like he was really pushing to break this church up, and he thought he had it. And when it all fell apart, March was kind of a pivotal month in 2008. Now, I had seen from my blog that people at the charismatic church were hitting my blog. I knew that. And part of the reason I kind of knew it was happening from the inside was that there was a woman who went to that church. She had been depressed for 7 years, could never get over depression in that church. She took a course based on the manuscript of Modeling God.
Okay.
And basically, boom, her depression was gone.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so she became one of the 4 people who wrote a testimonial for the back cover of the original version of Modeling God.
All right.
And so what you had this woman who had been going to the charismatic church for 7 years, depressed, read Modeling God, and basically like within a month or less, depression was gone. And she wrote a testimonial. So I could understand why the pastor of the charismatic church was reading Modeling God or looking at it or having questions, because here's this woman in his church who had written a testimonial. Now, remember, we're sitting here in February when I see these things happen. The book had published in July of the previous year. So I'm feeling like I'm free and gone, clear and gone here. But I noticed that they're kind of hitting, the blog. So on March 20th, the pastor of the charismatic church mails a 20-page refutation of Modeling God to all the pastors in the valley, and he mails me a copy.
In like a manila folder, right? Was it
Right.
like real professionally looking, sealed? Yeah. Okay.
So there's this 20-page refutation against Modeling God being sent out to all the pastors in the valley. And he's never talked to me, never asked me a question, never nothing.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting in all of this is the large church pastor, again, who was getting along with the mentee, writes me an email. He initiates writing me an email. So I want to read you part of that email. He says, "Hello, John." He says, "I have not read your book, but plan on it. Someone sent me the dissertation that the charismatic pastor did on your teachings and on your book. I glanced at it, but have not read it yet either. Whether or not there is any truth in what he's saying or not, the way he is going about this is so wrong and unbiblical. Clearly in Matthew 18, Jesus himself instructs us how to handle an issue of concern with another. Clearly, we are to go directly to that person in private first." Again, which he did not do. "And if they don't hear, then we are to take 2 or 3 others with us. The charismatic pastor has clearly defied this biblical instruction. I just want to assure you that I will be praying for you as you wrestle through this and the injustice of how he is handling this. In his grace," and then pastor of the big church. So I wrote him back immediately. I like to just write right back immediately.
Oh, yeah.
So I write him back. I say, "You were completely correct. I appreciate your heart. I truly appreciate people questioning me because it always leads to me having to go deeper and understand more, and I benefit as well as others. Ultimately, others will benefit with this refutation, but I guess I wish I pushed myself harder so it wouldn't lead to people like the charismatic pastor doing damage. So notice I'm right from the beginning, right immediately, I'm saying, look, I actually appreciate people questioning. I actually appreciate that he wrote a refutation. I would like for him to have come to me,
Yeah.
and I'm going to kind of blame myself. I think if I'd have done a better job of explaining everything, he wouldn't have had this misunderstanding. So I'm going to blame myself. And again, this was the last paragraph of this letter. I said, again, I appreciate your heart, and I don't mean to overstep my bounds. So ignore this next part if you want. The charismatic pastor ought to hope the situation with you goes away. I believe if anything serious develops, a lawyer will tell you to depose him for who brought his attention to this situation and what exactly they said. Then they will depose that person, and if anything is different or isn't factual, they can end up going to jail. Something tells me it is the same person who directed his attention to me. So my point to him was, realize somebody came at you, somebody alerted him to this situation with your son. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel, I couldn't say why, but I said, I just feel like it's the same person who's doing this to me.
Okay. So I like this. I mean, first, the big church pastor reaching out to you is a courtesy that he didn't have to do in the first place. But now
Not at
your
all.
response back to him is also kind of showing him, there's an area we may be connected in, even, another connection between the two of you.
Right. So strategically, though, I have the backing of the pastor of the biggest church in the valley going, that guy is wrong.
Yeah.
So I know what was done was wrong.
Yeah.
I also,
It's not all in your head, right? Okay.
it's not
So,
in my head. And the
yeah.
other thing is, again, what I've been saying in part two is I'm like, look, I want somebody to show me where I'm wrong. Now,
Yeah.
what I didn't say to him, but what I'm also kind of thinking is, hey, if his reputation truly shows where I'm wrong, I'm done.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pastor, for relieving me of the situation. I'm no longer responsible for getting this information out because it's wrong information. Why didn't somebody else see it? Wow, you're an amazing pastor, an amazing theologian to see something that no one has saw, not even a publishing company. No one saw this. Thank you. I appreciate you. So that was truly my heart in this entire
In a
situation.
sense, the charismatic pastor could have to carry the burden of what is the right answer then to this whole thing. And again, you can go and get a job somewhere else.
Right. And unless he doesn't have the right answer.
Right.
But again, if he can show me where what I'm saying is contradictory, thank
The
you.
burden's
Because
off your
I don't see
shoulders.
it. I
Yeah.
don't see it. So 5 days after he puts out the refutation, he writes, the charismatic pastor writes a review of my book on Amazon. And he titles the review Gnosticism Reinvented. So I'm going to read you this entire review, and then I think we should go through this
All right.
because I think it's going to show where I was in the moment when I read this. So first of all, I'm just going to read this whole thing, and everybody at home, you can play at home, see how much of this you agree or disagree with. Modeling God is a book that deals very little with scripture and a lot with John G. Lenhart. It is a very poorly written book and ultimately not even Christian in terms of holding to what is broadly seen as Orthodox Christianity. Lenhart's theological construct is Gnosticism reinvented, heretical to its very core. Here is what Lenhart teaches. Number one, sin is relative. Number two, grace is something you pay for. Number three, Jesus is not fully divine by nature. Number four, there is no event where one accepts Christ and is saved. Number five, there is no need to receive Christ. Number six, the cross has little meaning in salvation. Number seven, that unless you have gained a value from God, prayer is worthless. Number eight, marriages can be dissolved if they are unprofitable to one of the partners. Considering how much of the core of the Christian faith he rejects, the fact that he considers his work evangelical and Christian is amusing in and of itself. I have read this book and encountered people who have been personally mentored by John. As a pastor in John's community, I can attest that his teaching is divisive. Several people influenced by John have had their marriages disintegrated because of John's teaching, including John's own marriage. John is not welcome at virtually any church in our metropolitan area and it says, and been, should have said, and has been or had been asked to leave his own church. That will give you a little flavor of how this book feels as it is lived out in the local area. My encouragement would be to save your money or buy, that should be and buy, a good C.S. Lewis book. You'll be far more blessed. So now, me in that time, hoping he would get me off the hook, I read this. Modeling God's a book that deals very little with scripture. There is plenty of scripture in this book. So I'm questioning already what book he read.
Yeah.
Here's what he teaches. Sin is relative. Now, again, I'm going to be contrastive and defend him. And I'm going to see how he could be right. I can see how someone say sin is relative because sin isn't an objective. And I say this in Modeling God, it's not objective because there are some things that were sin before the law or weren't a sin before law that are a sin. And to him to do something and he doesn't do it, to him it is sin. So
implying what's sin for me isn't necessarily what's sin for you, being there then relative, right?
Right. So I'm going to say, number one, he's right. That's what I taught. 2, grace is something you pay for. Literally the opposite of that. So the thing is that I showed what grace is, and then I argued for what people are saying grace is, Orthodox Christianity, if you will, and him, and what the implications would be. And the implications would be, because of justice, they would have to pay for that grace. And what's interesting, jumping way ahead, when I finally got a public apology as to this, a woman in the audience, I believe was a pastor or she was an evangelist.
She's in full-time ministry. I can't remember what role, but yeah.
She gets up in front of everybody, asks me a question, and she makes this point.
Yeah.
How come you're saying grace is something you pay for? And I said, could you show me in the book where I say that?
Yeah.
She takes 30 seconds, pulls
it up
in front of everybody, rereads it, and goes, "Oh, you're saying other people are not you, oh." And I affirmed it right there. I said, do you realize there's a pastor who wrote a review and didn't take 30 seconds, like what you just took, to figure that out? So number 2 is just showing me, okay, that was clearly wrong, but maybe he got discombobulated. That's fine.
So this is something that we do in the book clubs a lot, is we explain this subtle point of how you wrote Modeling God. And you're actually doing it right now, John, where you're hearing the charismatics perspective and you're arguing for it and against, like, what's both sides of the argument. So that's how you wrote Modeling God too, where it's like, here's you didn't merely give the non-contradictory answer in every doctrine. You would give it, and then you would also compare and contrast it to the Orthodox view in a way that you and I now know what you're really doing is you're helping people with the unlearning process.
Right. But also it's something Paul does.
It's just really healthy for your brain too. Really
but this is a technique Paul does in the Bible.
Yeah.
So if you can't understand what I'm doing, then you definitely don't understand what Paul's doing, because he's doing it at a much higher level.
Yeah.
And he's much smarter than me. So just so you know, if you can't interpret this from me, there's no way you're interpreting the Bible.
So what's happening a lot then is people will take the times when you're trying to make an argument, or what would the argument for the contradictory view be, and you're playing it out. I could take that sentence and say, John's teaching this. It's like, no, you're presenting an argument for a belief, but you're not saying this is the right belief.
Right. And my point would be, so that's wrong. Grace being something you pay for is wrong? Yes, it is. I say the same thing.
Right.
We
Right.
actually agree.
Yeah.
I didn't say
Which
that. I say the other side says that. I don't say that. But they're taking a what? This is what I wrote, but the how and why behind it was for the other side. And again, this is something that if we had talked face
yeah,
to
this is
face, you'd
you
think that this would get, even though this woman took 30, I asked one question and this woman figured it out herself. I didn't even have to make the point.
it would have
So,
saved them a lot of postage if you would have just had a conversation with you.
right. So number 3, Jesus is not fully divine by nature. And we're going to talk about this a little later. Clearly, I say that he's divine by nature.
Yeah.
He's fully man and fully God. I say that. There is, number 4, there is no event where one accepts Christ and is saved. Yes, I say that. So I explain that. Number 5, there's no need to receive Christ. I
Yep.
absolutely say there's absolutely
Right.
a need to receive that.
Yeah.
6, the cross has little meaning in salvation. I blatantly say
You
it's
teach
by the
why
cross. Yeah.
it's needed more than I've ever heard at any level. You explain the really detailed reason why it was needed.
Right. In fact, when I was at San Damiano, I people rereading the manuscript, and somebody came up to me and said, "You don't specifically say the cross is." He goes, "You imply it. If you piece things together, you don't say this." I said, "Thank you for that." And I write, there's a line in Modeling God that says, it is the cross that provided, and I say it blatantly. I show that to the guy. He never talked to me again. And I always thought that was kind of funny. It was like somebody was pointing something out. I took it to make the book better. I changed it so that it blatantly said that, and the guy never talked to me again, which made me feel like he did not want the entire book. He
Where
wanted to
maybe
get off the hook.
that was his excuse to not have to read the book or to agree with it. And now you
So
you took that.
So I know number 6 is blatant. I know there's a sentence blatantly. Number 7, that unless you have gained a value from God, prayer is worthless. I do say that you need to have reward or value, spiritual value, in order for your prayers to work. We talked about that in the last episode about merit.
Yeah,
So I
merit.
do say that, but unless you've gained a value from God, that part's wrong.
Right.
It's you can gain a value from other people.
Yep.
That's the reward model.
Mhm.
So that one's wrong with these 2 words from God. I do not say that. I do say a
And-
value through interactions with people.
And then to end that statement though with blatantly saying prayer is worthless is like that's pretty big. That's a pretty big statement right there.
Right.
too.
It's another good point. I never said prayer is worthless.
Right.
8, marriages can be dissolved if they're unprofitable to one of the partners. Where is that in Modeling God?
And it's not. And this is where, I mean, one of the thoughts I had is as the review keeps going, it becomes less about the book and more about you.
Right. And the
it's
thing
like, where
is
is this from? Where is this from?
number 8 is not even anywhere in
Mm-mm.
Modeling God. The fact I say we'll answer, I say in Modeling God, we will answer this idea of when it's right or wrong to end a marriage in the next
Modeling God's
edition.
wills, which
In
now
Modeling God's wills.
Modeling God only addresses marriage in the sense of its relation to love and it
Right.
being the ultimate test of love. It's not meant to be an exhaustive explanation of marriage itself, or definitely not of how you would dissolve a marriage. Yeah. So it's just
Right. So the first point, I'll give them the first point. 4 of the next 7 are blatantly wrong.
right.
Like I literally
Not
say the opposite.
interpretation, not opinion, not preference. It's like
fact.
factually incorrect.
Fact. And then 3 of them is, I think he just
twist.
misunderstood something, or
Yeah.
he got confused on me arguing the other side.
Yeah.
So he went 1 for 8. Now, it says, I have read this book and encountered people who have been personally mentored by John. I only mentioned one person I've mentored. He
In
didn't
the
encounter
book.
this person. What's that?
You mean you only mention one person you've mentored? Like
It
in the
says
book?
it is still part of the review. I have read his book and encountered people who have have been personally mentored by John. There's only one mentee. There's only one mentor.
And they never met.
Yeah. Andrew and him never met. Now, here's the other part of this. You could say I was mentoring people in the group that left,
Yeah.
but none of those people he had talked to.
Right.
So he hasn't talked to people that I personally mentored.
Right.
He cannot do it. He said, John is not welcome at virtually any church in our metropolitan area. The big church pastor is on my side here.
Right.
I could literally go to any church. I hadn't been kicked out of any church. And it says, and had been asked to leave his own church. I was not asked to leave the church I attended up in Green Bay. I was not asked to leave San Damiano. I told that story. I left.
Right.
I had not been asked to leave any church. So that is blatantly a lie. And so that gives you a little flavor of this book feels as it's lived out in the local area. So what he's doing is he's testifying to the rest of the world a personal testimony about me to the rest of the world. Now, is the rest of the world going to care what this guy says? Well, that's kind of part of the story. So if you think about it, I'm sitting here going, there's so many factually things wrong about this. And the guy seems pretty smart. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to write him and ask me to show me where I'm wrong. Like specifically, like, can you, like, some of the stuff isn't exactly right, but maybe he's still got something. I'm kind of hoping he's still got something. So I write to him and I ask him a series of questions. And really the only questions he answers is the problem he has with the book. And the problem he had was, he says, you're not using divine revelation by the Spirit to interpret the Bible. You're using a man-made logic. So here's the thing that I've tried to explain in so many different ways. But when you go to the Bible and you read it, and you talk about this now a lot, what you read, we can all agree on what you read, what the words say. Why it's there depends on the context. And then the why behind the why, the doctrine has got to be consistent throughout the Bible. That's all logical. That all makes sense. He's saying that he wants the interpretation to be, God has shown me specially what this means, and I can't be questioned because he specially gave it to me. And what's that called, Joel?
Well, that's Gnosticism, right? Which he's accusing you of.
That's where, like, I'm looking at these emails and I'm going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You wrote a review accusing me of Gnosticism, which is, again, what's Gnosticism, Joel?
Well, it's this belief that you have special revelation over some interpretation from God, and really it's a rationalization to not have to answer for what you believe. So
Right.
I could basically say no, like this is what God told me, and in fact, if you question me on it, you're proving you don't really get how God works.
Which is cultish.
Oh, very, very much. Yeah.
So he's putting this onto me, but I wrote Modeling God to explain logically what the Bible said. This is no special revelation.
Right.
Here's what the Bible says. And if we use these 4 tools that Jesus taught, then what will happen is we will get the truth. So there's 4 tools that Jesus taught. And this is how Modeling God starts off. There's causality, non-contradiction, contrastive thinking, and growth mindset over comfort.
Yeah.
Everybody uses these 4 to make their argument against everybody else.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to avoid these 4 so they could just be right.
When it comes to their own beliefs. Yeah.
And Jesus taught all 4.
Yeah.
So I'm using principles Jesus taught to interpret the Bible. So if you think about it, before you go to the Bible, step 1 is not read the Bible. Step 1 is to understand how to interpret the Bible.
Really?
Then step 2 is to read the Bible and interpret it according to tools that result in the truth. He's saying, no, step 1 is you just read the Bible. Well, what happens if he reads something and I read something? Or what if God tells him A and God tells me B? How do we decide which one it is?
You have to have some objective measure for what's true.
So if you look at it, it's like, he is accusing me of doing the thing that he's saying is the reason why he can't believe me, because I'm not doing the thing he's accusing me of. He's accusing me of being a Gnostic, and then he doesn't like my book because it's not Gnosticism.
Yeah, and honestly, the whole sin is relative thing, he's also arguing for a relativistic perspective of truth too.
Right.
True. Why? Because he says so? Because he feels it's right? Like there's no objectivity there at all. It's all relative.
Right. So there's a couple of emails back and forth, and I keep asking these series of questions. And finally, the final email in this exchange is, here's the questions that I ask. And here's how I say it. You conclude I believe in a non-sovereign and non-omniscient God. So that I know exactly how my definitions are not the same as yours, please tell me what you mean when you use the word sovereign in the context of your refutation. What is your definition of omniscient? Because these were all conclusions he made in the refutation. Does God know all the possible things that can happen? Does God always, in every instant and detail, know for sure what will happen and only what will happen before it happens? Because I'm trying to understand which way he's going, which side of the conjunctive he's in here. Does God always know what everyone will decide before they think it? Because I think God knows after they think it. Has the future already happened? So now I'm blatantly finding out if he's a Calvinist.
Right.
What is your definition of omnipresent? What is your definition of omnipotent? Because we know, and like we talk in Modeling God's Wills, God tells Hezekiah through Isaiah, you're going to die. This illness is going to end in death. Hezekiah prays, and it doesn't.
Right. He's got time added to his life. And
so did God lie? This goes down some pretty dark paths. The charismatic pastor's response was, I have not answered your question specifically. This is intentional. So after all these exchanges,
so he's intentionally avoiding your.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he will not answer my questions, my specific set of questions. So we had so here I am sitting there going, this guy's off. He's supposed to be, smart, and maybe he's like the Apostle Paul, who was Saul. Maybe. Saul killed Christians. This guy hasn't
really
killed
ambitious,
anybody.
really ambitious guy, right?
Right. And he hasn't killed anybody. And Saul turns out to be the best. What if this guy it clicked and he took this thing?
He's got a lot of energy.
Yeah,
right?
You can take it. You could be completely right. Why don't you take it, be right? And then I'll be over here in the background. I'll be done. I don't have to do any of this. This would be great. It'd be great to turn it over to this guy. Yeah. And I just want to understand him so that I can help point out passages in the Bible and get him on board. That's what I'm trying to do. And after several exchanges, he writes and he goes, he won't meet with me unless I say I'm going to confess and repent. So basically he goes, the only way I'll meet with you is you have to tell me ahead of time you're going to confess and repent to me. Interesting.
Yeah, plus it's going back to the big church pastor. He argued the Matthew 18 process, and the Matthew 18 process doesn't even address repentance. It just addresses hearing each other.
So I mentioned the Matthew 18 to him. Like, why aren't you doing the Matthew 18? So he says, look, if you want to do the Matthew 18, if you want to go to people to be confronted about this, you can go to my associate pastor and 2 other people. And he names the 2 other people. Do you want to guess who the 2 other people are?
Honestly, I don't even know. I have no idea.
The pastor of San Damiano and the other John.
Oh, no. Whoa. Okay. This just got a lot more complex. So he's saying you could confront him through these other 2 guys who you had been involved in ministry with just months
that wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't resolve this. So, but he's saying, what is he saying? He's saying he's working with them. Yeah. He's saying they're tight. And then the next day, the last day, what's that?
Maybe some of the information he's operating from came from them.
Well, here's the thing. That's the thing is that the last day, the next day, which was the last day of March, we find out through the mentee that the San Damiano pastor had admitted to the pastor's son that the San Damiano pastor and his wife, I believe, went to the Charismatic pastor in 2005 to basically initiate these allegations, and the Charismatic pastor had recorded it.
Oh.
So what I had said to the big pastor,
Oh, geez.
but this feeling I had ended up being right. The San Damiano pastor and the other John had initiated this attack. And you can see why.
Oh.
He got replaced by the pastor's son, and then he initiated this attack on me
Oh.
through this pastor.
So there was that connection you felt like you had with the big church pastor was right.
Right.
It was the same person or two people who were behind both of the conflicts that came. What? So one was on the big pastor's son, and then one was on you.
So here's where we can reveal what
Feel
mobbing
dirty.
is. Well, here's where we can reveal what mobbing is if I attack you, I'm bullying you.
Okay. Yeah.
But if I go to another person and motivate them to attack you, and I go to other people and get them to attack you, now you're being mobbed. The people you're dealing with are not the source of the complaint. And again, this is massively unbiblical. I would even call this an abomination to God. And do people who commit abominations to God go to heaven? Interesting.
Yeah.
But that's what mobbing is. What's so nefarious about mobbing is the source of the issue is not
It's
bullying
hidden. It's hidden.
Right.
Like it's hidden, and which makes it nefarious. I like that word, and it's also the danger in that I can just immediately see is the people who are attacking you feel justified in what they're doing because it was someone like they're maybe defending someone else is what they feel like they're doing.
Okay, let's
Or
take it
helping
another step now. What should I be? You nailed it dead on. And we haven't rehearsed any of this. Okay.
Yeah.
You're in the moment. You're a strategic genius guy. Okay. So what does that mean about how I approach this now?
How you approach
this situation? I'm in the moment now. It's April. What do I realize? The attack is coming from.
Okay. So in that case, what I'm realizing is maybe I should be more merciful to the people who are attacking me and
the charismatic pastor.
Yeah. We're like, this guy's been duped. I got chills. Like, oh my God. Oh,
so now what I do is I read the refutation.
All right.
I read it hardcore. And I'm sitting there with a pen, like a teacher, like a professor, grading it. There were 200 factual inaccuracies, not opinion, not interpretation. We can go through all that. But like we've already talked about, literally factual inaccuracy.
Yeah.
And the thing is that he writes to me and says he's going to put the whole thing on the internet. And he wants me to write a rebuttal to the refutation, which is interesting because that's feeding into this model that he's duped, he's deceived.
Yeah.
And he's thinking he's so right because these people are justifying him. And he goes, look, we will provide links to each other's post. You in your blog provide a link to my refutation, and I on my refutation will provide a link to your rebuttal. I'm like, that sounds great.
Yeah. And I know you, like, honestly, John, I know you well enough to know, like, and I remember during this time, some of this, but man, this would be right up your alley. Like, yeah, let's do this. This is like, this sounds fun. Like,
yeah, it's great. You're asking me to write a rebuttal your refutation. I get to do this back. Sounds good. Yeah. Let's do it. So I put the rebuttal up and I put the link. When he reads my rebuttal, he does not put a link to his refutation. Yeah. And the reason is that my rebuttal was just a slam dunk.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And you can see why, because he was so far off. It was just a slam dunk. And my overall conclusion is that this charismatic pastor has a complete lack of interpretation skills. He cannot interpret text. And if you can't interpret text, then what are you doing as a pastor with the Bible? And you'd said it before in one of these interviews. If you can't interpret modeling God the right way, how are you ever going to interpret the Bible the right way? It is so much harder to interpret the Bible. So if you are botching it this bad, and I got a couple examples I put in my rebuttal, I want to explain. So this is a part that I actually wrote in the rebuttal. I said, so I went section by section in his refutation. So I go, the inaccuracies in this section come mainly from overlooking key passages in modeling God and projecting a flawed perspective onto the statements that are made. Some of these statements are blatant misrepresentations, even though, and I put that in capital letters, the charismatic pastor gives a reference page number.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
he gives a reference page number, and if you go to that reference page, it doesn't say what he says.
What he quoted
all.
isn't even there.
And I
Yeah.
say, for instance, the charismatic pastor states, so this is what he states, quote, Lenhart then goes on and constructs a model in which grace is limited to God's, quote, divine influence upon the heart, and end quote, and influence we must pay for so as not to violate God's justice, end quote. Well, we've already said that's not what I said.
Right.
But here's what I say. The reference number points to page 67 of Modeling God. On page 67 of Modeling God, this is what is stated. Grace, the divine influence upon the heart and its reflection in the life, Charis, 5485. Notice he misrepresents the definition and never mentions it was obtained from Strong's Concordance. This isn't my definition.
Not your definition. Right.
It's not even my definition.
Right.
The Strong's reference number is even given. The blatant ignoring of key passages from modeling God throughout this half of the refutation are the most troubling parts of the refutation, and when dealt with, will bring into question the charismatic pastor's ability to interpret a more complex book like the Bible. So the other situation, this became the most famous one, is Jesus not being fully man. And this is found on page 26 and 27 of the first edition. Yeah. And the thing is that I write in parentheses, I say, notice, Jesus' father being God and his mother as a human would only make him half man and half God. So what I'm saying is that when, and I'll read the whole passage, but that's what's in parentheses, and that's the opposite argument.
Yeah, and in a sense, it's like you saying, we know there must be an answer that's different than this to make sense of Jesus being more than half man, half God.
Right, because this explanation wouldn't make Jesus fully man and fully God. Now, here's what the entire passage says. The only way for God to bridge this gap between his nature and our nature was for there to exist a being that had a free will and chose to be righteous and just in everything he did. This would make this person fully God because he is always completely righteous and just, completely just, which means, so Jesus is divine by nature. He's fully God.
There it is.
This would make the person fully man. I just said Jesus fully man because he has a free will. He could choose to act apart from his nature. This is how Jesus is able to be fully man and fully God. Parentheses, notice, Jesus' father being God and his mother being a human would only make him half man and half God. End parentheses. This person provides the only way for man to have a relationship with God. This is Jesus' model. So that part right there just addressed like 4 of the things that he got wrong in the Amazon review.
Yeah.
Jesus is divine by nature. Jesus is the only way we have this. And it's blatant. But he took the one parenthesis, quoted that like it was my explanation, which it clearly was not. It was me saying other people's explanation of this doesn't make Jesus fully man and fully God. Everything around it was my explanation, and I said it. So this is like what what was blatant. Those are just two examples. There's a ton of them, but that one's kind of the most famous because it was so early in the book, and he put that out there, and people go, "Wow, if he's saying Jesus not fully man, fully God, that's really wrong." And I would get people who read Modeling God to go, and they'd read the refutation and go, "Do you know there's a pastor out there misinterpreting Modeling God?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm well aware, well aware of that."
Mhm.
Okay, so a couple people, including your dad was one of them, met with the charismatic pastor.
Yeah.
And they're all like, he's easy to talk to. He's very logical, but he would not meet with me. So I had people meeting with him, but he just would not meet with me. He didn't want me to be heard, none of this stuff. And I'm just thinking, man, he's getting duped by
Yeah.
these two people. So the thing is throughout April, and this is like a week apart, me and the pastor of the big church are writing emails. So I remember I'd written that last email kind of saying, "Hey, I think this is coming from the same person."
Yeah.
So the pastor says, "Thanks, John. Great to hear from you. Thanks for your comments and concerns about our situation. Surely there's intention to do harm." So he had already concluded his intention is to do harm.
Yeah.
But one of his promises, God's promises, is, quote, "I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and for your welfare, to give you a future and a hope. We need to stand on his promises. Thanks for your prayers." And I said I was praying for him. I responded back like a week later, "I think this will result in good." And I said, "Here's the link to the rebuttal." So he had asked me to give a rebuttal, not this pastor, but the other pastor. So I wanted him to have the rebuttal. And I said, "If you're reading Modeling God, it'll probably be worth your time to read the above post," meaning the rebuttal. "I think we can all privately learn from the charismatic pastor's public mistakes in interpreting text." And then like a week later, the big church pastor said, "Hey, John, I trust with you that it will result in good in many ways. I commend you for your diligence in attempting to answer your critic and still be open yourself to learning and growing. I am reading your book now and prefer not to read what the charismatic pastor wrote or your response to him until after I've read the book for myself. Thanks a lot. 3 things will remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love in him." And the pastor signs off.
It's wonderful.
Now, the woman who claimed to be prophetess started publishing that Modeling God is the first of the 3 heresies she prophesied would happen in the valley. So now she has taken up the call to call this a heretical work, and she's now telling everybody it's heretical. And the charismatic pastor is now telling people, because people are saying to him, "Well, this woman in your church is on the back of the book, and she got her depression cured from all this." And he said, "Only the devil can get results that quick. God can't even get results as quick as what I got, but I think it was God through
Right.
this work." But now he's telling people, "Nope, John got these results with this woman in my church through the devil."
Oh.
So where do you go with this? I mean, some people know how this goes down, but at this point, I have the big church pastor going, "Hey, this guy, the charismatic pastor, is clearly out of bounds. He should have come to you, Matthew 18. He should have done all of that. He's not doing it. I'm going to read your book, and don't get down about this." I got this charismatic pastor who is factually wrong about everything he's stating, basically. He's just factually wrong, but he won't hear me. He won't let me be heard. He won't meet with me. And instead, he's pointing me to 3 people because his associate wouldn't meet with me anyways, is when I reach out to these people, "Okay, let's meet." They don't want to meet. And he eventually writes me and says, "Well, I'm not saying they're going to meet," but he said, "I'm going to get a group of pastors together and we're going to basically fix you." I said, "Let's do it. Let's set it up." Because I just really am feeling like he's duped by these 2 people.
Yeah.
And he's feeling empowered, but he's not trying to get the information. And man, if he would just click over, he could embrace this and take it, and I could be done, because I just want to be done. I don't want to deal with any of this. I don't want to do any of this. I just want to be done. And he didn't have anything that proved it wrong, which was my first hope. I was hoping he was going to be able to prove it wrong. He didn't have anything to prove it wrong. So now I'm hoping that maybe something clicks, he takes this over and he runs with it. Because the reality is that I'm trying to still look, I'm still doing all this time looking for jobs and writing emails and sending resumes and doing all this stuff. And my goal is to just get out of here and get this thing in my rearview mirror.
It's a wild 5 months.
Yeah, keeps getting wilder and wilder. But there's a lot, like I say, if you just put yourself in these shoes,
Oh,
with this other option to consider.
so I know there's a lot more to come. There's a lot more. I mean, what's the tension like at this point? Because I know the tension keeps increasing, but what's it like for you in this beginning of?
Right. And it's making me want to go. It's
Yeah.
making, I'm willing to step into it, but no one will step into it. So you're just sitting in it. And there's just a small group of people who are behind me. But the other last thought that could be happening here is he had humiliated himself going after the big church. And he needed a distraction. He didn't want everybody sitting on the fact that he had been wrong, blatantly wrong. When he went after the son of the big church pastor, everything was well written, qualified like a lawyer would write. Everything he wrote to me was just wrong, was libel and slander and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It was just wrong. Like clearly no lawyer had seen this. And there was the thought of, is he just using me to distract everybody from the screw up he had with the big church? And the longer this could go, the more people would forget what he did wrong. And that's another option. So
At this
what was he
point,
really
with what
trying
we
to
have
do?
now, it's like we don't really know what the future holds. But I know, I mean, this is quite the story already, and we're still just in 2008, and there's stuff we're still dealing with on a monthly basis here that can be traced back to some of the
Yeah.
events we're talking about today. So, yeah, I'm man, thank you, John. Thanks
Yep.
for being here today. Mobbed Part 3. I can't wait for Part 4. This is incredible. Holy smokes. I mean, honestly, like I was there for this. Now, you and I are a lot closer now, so like there's a lot of the details of what's going on that I either wasn't completely involved in yet, or I just don't remember at the level you do because you were going through it. And it even though I was there when this happened, it feels like I'm listening to a movie being told to me of like, how did this happen?
Yep.
How did this happen? And almost there's parts of it, it's so ridiculous. In some parts, it doesn't feel real, but I know it was, and it's very intriguing. So thanks again. Can't wait to have you on again. Have a
Me
good
too.
day, John.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right. Like I said, that was a ride, huh? Just this episode alone, this small part of what happened in the beginning of 2008 blew my mind. See, I was there for a lot of this with John, but there's parts I don't remember, and there's parts that maybe I never even knew, things John was dealing with personally that even though I was around and I was with him at the time, there's things he was dealing with that I just was ignorant of. And tell you honestly, there's a lot I was going through at that time in my life as well. I only wish I was able to be, more supportive to him at the time, now knowing what he was going through at the time and how few people he had lifting him up. But it's an incredible story, as you're hearing for yourself. So I wanted to just unlock and unpack some stuff from the story. There's a lot I know we were all taught just from the story itself, but I want to unpack some more. I'm a doctrine guy. I like doing that. So let's look at Gnosticism a little bit more detailed. So Gnosticism is defined as a man-made doctrine where individuals claim to have special mystical revelation directly from God. This new knowledge is used to rationalize the actions of this person and to rationalize the beliefs of this person that would contradict the Bible or that would contradict the established Word of God. Now, a core feature of Gnosticism is that it is special revelation, and that this special revelation supersedes the scriptures that came before the special revelation. What this does is it leaves this person in a state of being able to not be questioned or to be objectively proven wrong. So it can be really dangerous. Now, it may seem obvious, but this belief, this, approach to information is condemned in the Bible. Paul, in the letter to the Galatians, actually warns against any different gospel being preached. Now, within a church context, this Gnostic mindset really does manifest in two ways. One's kind of on a strict side, where what this does is it's the leaders or the teachers in the church that are preaching man-made doctrines and place themselves in a position where they cannot be confronted. So I'm at the top of this pyramid. You can't confront me. You can't question me. You just have to do what I say. You just have to believe what I teach. Now, this is cultish. It also can be a form of idolatry. It definitely is placing this man between the believer and God. The other side of this is like a looser perspective, right? And this describes people who really, in an effort to avoid tension, they adopt this live your own truth mentality. These people are, maybe unwilling or unable to stand up to ask the why question, which makes them vulnerable to deception, makes them unable to defend themselves against false teaching. Now, ultimately, the answer is that Christians, really anybody, Christians aside, it should be everybody should know what they believe and why they believe it, and ultimately be able to support it with a resource outside of themselves. For a Christian, we should be able to support what we believe with the Bible. Now, really true and genuine faith welcomes people questioning our beliefs. It welcomes people, confronting what we believe. And true faith within a person that person would be willing to share what they believe and why they believe it. Because ultimately, we are all responsible for our own beliefs before God. Now, this brings in a whole other idea here. God cares more about the how and why than the what. Now, this is really simply shown in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6. I'm going to read a couple verses for you and kind of show you how what Jesus is doing here in the Sermon on the Mount is showing us this truth. It starts with verse 1. He says, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly." So there's two scenarios being played out. One is somebody gives to the poor, the charitable deed. Somebody gives to the poor, but they do so because they want everyone to see it. They do so to get, praise and affirmation, to be seen as the spiritual or generous person. And the second scenario is a person who gives to the poor, who does their charitable deeds, but nobody knows. They do it anonymously, and they end up getting rewarded through justice from the Father. Now, notice, in both scenarios, what happened is the exact same thing. Someone gave to the poor in both situations. Somebody did a charitable deed. That's the what. Jesus here is teaching how and why you do that what is what really matters. In general, according to justice, ultimately according to Jesus, and according to the Father. The how and why. Now, one of the other big things that this theme that came up in this episode is the Matthew 18 process, which is pivotal when we're dealing with conflict resolution within the church. I just wanted to give you a simple take on this that's something that's really helped me dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. And it simply comes down to, how do we deal with some issue that we have? If I have an issue with anybody, how ought I to deal with it? And it simply comes down to, well, who am I dealing with? The simplest way to look at this, and it does get more nuanced than this. If you need more help with how to deal with situations like this, feel free to reach out to me. But a simple rule is this. If you have an issue with a person, ask yourself, are they a believer or an unbeliever? Now, I'm not telling you to judge that person. I'm just saying, do you believe they're a believer? Do you believe they're an unbeliever? And if you're not sure, give them the benefit of the doubt and treat them like a believer before you treat them like an unbeliever. Okay. Now, with that aside, if they're a believer, confront them in love. Ask them, why did this thing happen? Ask them, did you really do or say this thing? Confront them. If they're an unbeliever, forgive them. State your will. You will not take out justice on your own, and that you give it over to God. And even if you could take out justice on them, you wouldn't, and just move past it. That's going to allow God to move in their lives at a greater capacity, ultimately, hopefully, for their conversion. Right? Confront a believer, forgive an unbeliever. Now, another thing I wanted to address, we saw from this charismatic pastor in his Amazon review. The attacks started about him refuting certain things that he believed were written in Modeling God. And it ended with him attacking John personally. So this is a logical fallacy that I see in the church all too much. And what it's called is the Latin phrase or the Latin words ad hominem. It means to the man. That's the interpretation, what those words mean in English. What it refers to is a personal attack that is used in place of a logical response to a discussion or to an argument. These personal attacks come in 4 different forms. But ultimately what we're seeing here is, instead of me addressing the argument itself, I start addressing the person who made the argument. I start making personal attacks on that person. This is known as a logical fallacy, meaning in the field of logic, when somebody uses one of these approaches, it is immediately discarded. It is immediately discredited. And I've seen this time and time and time again in the church. It's disgusting. See this in one of 4 ways. Flat out abuse. You're an idiot. You're too intelligent. You're a heretic. I have concerns about you. 2, circumstantial. Well, you have to say that because you're a Christian, or you would say that because you just want to be right, or you're getting paid to say that. The third is the you also approach. It says, well, you do the same thing that you're saying is wrong, or you're a hypocrite. And then 4th is guilt by association. Well, the Pharisees believed the same thing, or the Nazis believed the same thing, or the devil believes the same thing. So the thing is, even if the person using the ad hominem attack is right, meaning if any of those approaches is right, maybe the person is too intelligent, maybe they are a Christian, maybe they do get paid to say what they're saying, maybe they do only want to be right, maybe they do believe the same things as the Pharisees. Even if those attacks are correct, it still doesn't address the logic behind the original argument. Notice how this is just an approach that is used to distract from the argument itself. Therefore, a logical fallacy. If you're somebody who is meant to present information and argue for information in a way that is logical and sound and true, this logical fallacy immediately discredits you. Immediately you lose any credential you have of being somebody who's a reputable source of information. And John dealt with attacks like this over and over and over again. Why is this allowed in the church? What do you believe? Why do you believe it? That's it for today on Unlocked. I'm Dr. Joel Swakowski. You can find John on Instagram, on X, both with the @modelinggod handle. You can also find him at modelinggod.com, where there's more information about him, And also you can find access to Modeling God and Modeling God's Wills for purchase at that website as well. So go check out these resources. Go visit John on his social media stuff. He's got a lot of information that he gives away for free in those platforms. You can also find him on LinkedIn. Yeah, continue your journey. Thank you for listening. Keep seeking truth. Keep living it out. See you next time.